The whole purpose of that UPI nonsense was not to grow the Indian economy. It was to give the losers some money efficiently. So today we have a lot of losers. I think this government can claim with great pride it can reach every loser in this country. Every single loser can be reached. Number of people who are vulnerable to falling into poverty is approximately 50% of the Indian population. 800 million people are living off food charity. Obviously, poverty will go down. It doesn't mean vulnerability goes down, it means you don't starve. And regretfully, we have a very insecure government which picks up on these small trends. Even today, the finance ministry has published some absolute nonsense about the PLI scheme resulting in 1.28 lakh jobs or something like that. It's as much nonsense as the Prime Minister's promise that India would achieve middle income status by 2022. Today, our exports are not that different from our exports in the 1970s or 1980s. Our world share of exports is less than 2%. And people talk big. We need to be at something like 7-8% given the size of our economy.
Hello and welcome to ThePrint. I'm TCA Sharad Raghavan, Deputy Editor. And today we're going to be talking to Dr. Rathin Roy. He is a former member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, and he is currently a visiting fellow with the Overseas Development Institute. And of course, he is a noted economist. So what we're going to be talking about is, economic policies and how the government is thinking about the economy on various metrics. And yes, let's get to it. Thank you so much, Dr. Roy, for joining us.
Thank you.
So now, Dr. Roy, I'll start with the basic question. How concerned are you about the state of the economy?
Well, I'm not concerned about the state of the economy starting yesterday or last week or last month. I'm not one of those people who was, giving a lot of hot air about India's wonderful economic potential in 2021 or 2022.
Right.
I don't, understand why we have this sort of third world desire to talk up point estimate trends. Either that or people seem to have an extremely low intellectual capacity to retain any time series memory. The Indian economy has been experiencing growth rates that are low since 2016. COVID happened, the economy obviously collapsed in substantial measure. We only came back to our trend, what we would have been if COVID had not happened last year in terms of the size of the economy. Much slower than most advanced economies. Now, the fact that there were a couple of negative structural changes that happened as a consequence of COVID has only exacerbated the dismal performance of the Indian economy since 2016. Those are respectively that the share of manufacturing has tanked.
Right.
And I'm not surprised. We can talk about that. And the share of employment generated in agriculture, which is a proxy for nothing better to do, so might as well go back to my village and hang out and go and help out in the farm, is at the highest level in my lifetime. Close to half the economy is employed in agriculture.
Yep.
Nothing great has happened on human development trends. There's been nothing in the economy to indicate that anything has structurally changed since 2016.
But these multi-dimensional poverty index, you don't feel that that's
No, it
showing
has declined, but that is remember that the number of people who are vulnerable to falling into poverty is approximately 50% of the Indian population.
Right.
And therefore, the fact that poverty has declined has nothing to do with India being a great economy. What it means is that thanks to a government program to keep off destitution, the biggest anti-destitution program probably since the Victorian era in Britain, not in India. 800 million people are living off food charity. Obviously, poverty will go down. It doesn't mean vulnerability goes down, it means you don't starve. So, if we interpret that as a great success, I'm afraid I'm rather more ambitious about the Indian economy than all these losers who like to look at point estimates and talk India up. It's a very depressing fact that you see there are so many, how do I put it? politely. Let me not use the word losers. There are so many unsuccessful people in India who would rather be abroad or in the IAS. They fail to get into government and they fail to go abroad, which are the two outs you have really in this country. They're hanging out in the middle class and talk up trains which are not really trains. It's very difficult to build a sustainable, coherent intellectual policy discussion when you start cheerleading because of your own insecurities and failures. That has been happening in ample measure in India. And regretfully, we have a very insecure government which picks up on these small trends. Even today, the finance ministry has published some absolute nonsense about the PLI scheme resulting in 1.28 lakh jobs or something like that. It's as much nonsense as the Prime Minister's promise that India would achieve middle income status by 2022, and all this, So and now, of course, everyone is on Kool-Aid. So now nobody wants to talk about 2028. Everybody wants to talk about 2047. So in these circumstances, I'm afraid what you're seeing is a very depressing picture, which is very common in the world. In all failed states, in all failure economies, Thailand, Philippines, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa, you have this situation where, you don't want to acknowledge that you're failed. And that failure persists, but you sort of hide your face from the truth that your economy is bumping along well below its potential. Prosperity is not widely shared. More people are not becoming prosperous. These things are correctable, but political economy factors prevent them from being corrected. And I think that's where we are now.
So what is the structural issue with manufacturing that you had alluded to earlier?
Well, you see, the one thing you've got to understand is that, which nobody seems to understand, is that Indian productivity is very low.
Yes.
It's really, really low. It is abysmally low. India is not a high productivity country. If we were, 90% of my country would not be producing stuff in the informal sector.
Right.
So when you talk about manufacturing, again, we can do another fantasy which people have done all their life. I call India's export fantasy. I'm older than you. But since I was about 10 years old, people have been talking about India becoming an export powerhouse. The strategy to do that has not been to educate people, skill people, and get the basics in place to improve productivity, but to try and create enclaves. You suspend democracy, suspend human rights, suspend minimum wages, and suspend the generalized problems of poor infrastructure and crappy supply chains, and try and create these, special economic zones. I think nobody would be able to disagree with me now that laughable and clownish policy is today, and history will record it as a laughable and clownish failure.
Okay.
SEZs have failed spectacularly. Now that they have failed, what else do we do to create this great export-led economy? Because I'm assuming that, I'll come to domestic in a minute. I'm assuming that manufacturing, people who only sort of read, I don't know what they read. Other than film magazines, perhaps they read some things from The Economist filtered through WhatsApp. Such people will say, manufacturing growth depends on meeting demands of rich countries.
Right.
Okay, but to meet demands of rich countries, you've got to produce stuff for them with high productivity, right? So that is not happening. We have no strategy to do that. Today, our exports are not that different from our exports in the 1970s or 1980s. Our world share of exports is less than 2%. And
Yes.
people talk big. We need to be at something like 7-8% given the size of our economy to even take exports as a serious engine. And we, in fact, on top of it, we run a balance of payments deficit.
Right.
On the current, we run a current account deficit. So what exports? So exports does not fire. Let's leave that opium den of smoking exports and come to reality. So we're a large economy. We have, a large demand base, I would assume. But do we? So forget about poor people. Poor people can't consume. I mean, it's important they be subsidized and all that. Take somebody in this country who earns the minimum wage or twice the minimum wage or 3 times the minimum wage. What are the 5 things these people would like to consume without subsidy at affordable prices? Of these 5 things, at least 2 involve manufacturing. Actually, 2.5. The half is agriculture.
Right.
Now, if anybody can tell me how to deliver affordable food to a family without subsidy in India, I'll be a very keen listener. because it hasn't happened since 1971. Agriculture is hopelessly, traumatically, inefficiently, and incompetently subsidized, 360-degree subsidized. So much so that if you go and try and calculate the price of an unsubsidized, nutritious square meal, you will not be able to do it. Okay, because inputs are subsidized, outputs are subsidized, MSP is there, this is there, farmers are not happy, consumers are not happy, and in the end, you end up subsidizing 800 million people. Now, if extreme poverty has gone down, as people say it has, I'm sure it has, I'm sure 800 million people can't be poor in India. So you're subsidizing a lot of people who earn the minimum wage or more than the minimum wage. And that's ridiculous. When you earn the minimum wage or more than the minimum wage, you will be able to afford, like you and I, to go to the market and buy I'm not a communist, and I'm not a Victorian charity wala, So I like to go to the market and buy my own food. What's so complicated about that? What is complicated is not affordable. So all the manufacturing that comes from that collapses. Let me give you a very simple example for your listeners, viewers, whatever. Amul was set up to produce milk.
Yes.
The demand for milk is not enough for Amul to sell its entire output as milk. So what do they make? They make pizza, they make cheese, they make ice cream. This is ridiculous. Again, they're making the same things that only a small segment of the population, the top 10%, can afford. Right? So the things that you would get if you were able to produce these things affordably and with reasonable productivity, supply chains, food processing, collapsed. Okay. Second thing is shirts. Now, shirts is ironical. We make and export very small quantity of 3,000 rupee shirts. When it comes to the shirts that people who earn the minimum wage or double, by the way, when I say minimum wage, I mean 5 times the minimum wage, okay? And I'll tell you, I mean, everyone, and I'll give you a counterexample in a minute of why this is so important and why the demand base is so small. So people who earn the minimum wage wear shirts, and they wear 250 men at least. 250 rupee, 300 rupee shirts. 82% of such shirts are imported from Bangladesh and Vietnam. I don't know now, not Bangladesh, then where. Certainly not made in India. Why? So that big source of domestic demand gone. Construction and housing. If I earn the minimum wage or 2 times the minimum wage, forget all this again, charity and Awas Yojana and all this bullshit. I should be able to go, take an EMI, buy a 5 lakh, 6 lakh rupees house and build it. Why is that not happening at scale across the country? Even 10 lakh rupee house. We can build 50 lakh houses, 1 crore houses, 2 crore houses, and get EMIs for them. I don't have a robust market. It should be a much larger market, given the size of people who go and get EMIs to build 5 lakh, 10 lakh houses. That would hugely boost manufacturing demand. The other two have nothing direct to do with manufacturing, which are health and education. I would say that these are the 5 things that someone earning the minimum wage wishes to consume. We produce none of these things efficiently or productively, so we are unable to satisfy our own home market. And we can't do exports because we're incompetent. Obviously, manufacturing is going to tank. It's a classic failure story.
Right. But now, if you look at it, over the last, let's say, 14, 15 years, the Indian voter has actually been remarkably forgiving of economic hardship, whether it was demonetization or GST or, even the overnight lockdown, the fact that real wages haven't grown, that there aren't enough jobs. This doesn't seem to translate into voter anger. Do you think that tide is turning, or is that still the case?
Tide is not turning because the problem is bigger than the economy and the voter voting for the economy. I also share that same tolerance. I'm very forgiving of governments of India for not being able to take the lead on leading the economy because I understand 2 or 3 things about the country, and I think the Indian voter does also. You live in Delhi, right?
Yes,
Do you see people traveling without helmets on 2-wheelers?
quite often,
Do you see people driving on the wrong side of the road?
almost always.
Per capita income in Delhi is one of the highest in the country, and I live in South India. The per capita income is high. What amazes me since I've come to South India, I thought Delhi was full of North Indians, and there are certain stereotypes I had about their law-abiding willingness coming from history. But coming to South India, which is supposed to be so civilized and so law-abiding, same thing. It doesn't matter what the per capita income is, whether or human development is. Whether you're in Kerala with 100% human development, you will get people driving the wrongs. And the government of India is so weak, and the state governments too, so weak, so incompetent, so inefficient. They can't even manage traffic. A government that can't manage traffic is going to give you economic prosperity. I know they can't. That is one. Second, I know that the government of India works. If you start with the constable reports to local slumlord. You go up the levels of government. Everybody knows that the government does not work for the people. It does not necessarily work for common prosperity. It
Right.
works in the interests of extremely rich people. Nowadays, at least 20 years ago, people from Jamnagar would come to Delhi. Nowadays, I've noticed people from Delhi go to Jamnagar. That's a mark of a failing government. So I think what people have realized is that I've written about this, that there's all this claim about a development state and all that is all false. It's all rubbish. The sort of educated elites of India, they either want to go abroad or join the government, and they do both for personal gain. The rest of them are just failures trying to survive. And once you realize this, then you realize that all the government can do is provide you with some compensation. I call it a compensatory state. So this is not BJP or Congress. My thesis is that I'd say since about 2000, since about Narega starting. I remember I came back to this country. I lived between India and abroad once, and I came back just before Narega. I was working in government there, and I remember asking Dr. Ahluwalia this question. He didn't answer me. He smiled. I said, I don't understand, Dr. Ahluwalia. I've come back now. This is those Vijay Mallya good times, Everybody was doing well. And so
Yes.
I said, all good times happening in India, and everybody's talking about mark to market. And I noticed a certain level of decadent spending happening across society. In the middle of all this, why do we need Narega? Why do we need an employment guarantee? Employment should be growing. Now, after that, we would be seeing bad times. So, of course, we need Narega. I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
But that is exactly you see my point. That people understood since Narega that what the government is very good at doing is handout management. Then politics is about that. I'll give you 2,000 rupees, I'll give you 3,000 rupees, I'll give you a bus ticket. And it's logical. If a government is going to work principally in the interests of 9 slumlords with net worths ranging from 100 billion to 1 million, you know, and you can see it, it's revealed preference, as we say in economics. Indian airports have come to Bangalore or Hyderabad or Delhi. Really nice world-class airports. Really
Right.
crummy bus stations. Right? Really nice outer ring road. Really crummy, inner city streets. Lovely roads for rich people to drive in Hyderabad. No footpaths for poor people to walk in Hyderabad. So people can see where government priorities are. And therefore they've understood what you need from this government is get handouts. I also would love handouts. I'm hoping
Right.
for a handout in the budget. But that's all I know the government can give me. The government cannot deliver prosperity. It cannot deliver a coalition that will improve India's productivity and performance. It cannot deliver a reasonable lack of corruption. It cannot even deliver good traffic in the city. Therefore, let's all, try and get compensatory redistribution. And that's what people are doing. And that's quite right.
And as you said, it's not just this government, it's previous governments. This has been an endemic problem for a while. Right? They just
This has been a
anti-
problem, this has been a problem since our choice of path in 1991. We had about 15 years to fix it, but we chose not to. So you see, it was before we liberalized and the economy went on a growth path. It was a nasty. I grew up then. I was a very young man, but it's not a nice place to live. It was a boring country.
right.
Your best bet was to leave the country, or you join the exploiters by joining the IAS or the police or something, and you whack people and make some money and take a bribe, small bribe, not big bribe. What I call today a Bihar sort of bribe, not a Telangana sort of bribe. Chota paisa.
Yeah.
But when that changed, one thing common in those days before it changed was that all of us were rationed. I also couldn't buy an imported car. I also had to drink fairly cheap whiskey. I also had to suffer shortages in food, bad sugar. My bathroom was okay, but it was quite shabby.
Right.
Those things have changed now. Now I can have a bathroom. I can live a first world lifestyle in India, or at least a second world one. Absent dengue and chikungunya and all the revenge factors that failed societies have. Absent
Yes.
those, my bathroom, the booze I drink, the food I eat, the pasta I eat, I can pretend to go out, I can go to a shiny mall. I have a nice airport, I can pretend. What is it people said about Vande Bharat? I get a first world feeling. So some people can get a first world feeling. But the majority of the country is still rationed. That change meant that essentially you see growth that we saw since 91 was the growth that was impelled by the increase in prosperity of the top 150 million people. That's only 10% of the country. We have not been able to increase that number to 200, 300, 400. Let me give you 2 data points on this. In 1988, I got my first job. I was 21 years old. And that time my salary was good salary, 3,000 rupees a month, entry level government. Okay.
Right.
And a Maruti car in those days would have cost me 3.5 years salary. An AC would have cost me 1 year's salary. Today, the same guy who enters government, same job, same government with modest, no? Maruti car is about 8 months salary and an AC
Yeah.
is less than 1 month salary. So relative prices have moved to favor the top 150 million. What we want to consume has become cheaper and more affordable. Those were great times. But that can only impair consumption for a while. That's the lesson of Brazil. That's the lesson of Thailand. That's the lesson of the Philippines. After that comes that next transformation, which is the next 2 or 300 billion have to become prosperous. There we have failed, and we have failed in every dimension possible. Whether it is regional inequality or ethnic or inter-ethnic inequality, these inequalities between the top 10 and the bottom 90 have only exact. I'm not even talking about poor people. Forget poor people. They're not consumers here. I'm just talking the top half of the population. Right?
Right.
So that's one data point. Let me give you the second data point. When you start paying income tax in India, at what percentage of the per capita income? I'll tell you. It's about 320%. You have to earn 320% of the per capita income to start paying income tax. And that's
Yes.
wise, because below that, if you start paying income tax, you'll starve. Right? So that's why we have such few income taxpayers. Forget all that WhatsApp uncle nonsense. That's a simple reason why. We have a low per capita income. Very few people earn enough to pay income tax. Minimum you have to earn to pay income tax is about 40,000 rupees a month. And that's 3 times the per capita income. Sorry. Now, if that is 3 times the per capita income, then what is it in a country like the UK? It is 1/3 the per capita income. What was the income tax ratio in 1991? 3.5 times the per capita income. What is it now? 3.5 times the per capita income. Prosperity would mean that that ratio would reduce. As our per capita income grows, there'll be more people paying income tax at a lower multiple of the per capita income, you see? And
Right.
you become
And
first world when somebody at the per capita income also pays income tax. It's as simple as that. But in India, we are still at 3.5, just like any failed country. So all these metrics will tell you what happened. The growth path has been fundamentally unequalizing. This has led to structural problems. The export opium dream has failed. May it succeed. I hope it succeeds. Everybody will tell me tomorrow we'll do it. India has always been about kal karenge. I don't believe in the future tense in India. It doesn't work. Actually, our ancient philosophers knew that. That's why everything was measured in yugs in India. Because the 2047 is very easy to give gas about. Anybody can do it. 2028, we will still not be getting people paying income tax at less than 3.5 times the per capita income. You will still not be servicing the demand of people for 300 rupee shirts. You will still not have a good healthcare education system. You will still, therefore, not be servicing the economic prosperity of the top half of your population. And that is the structural crisis we are in. It's very correctable, but it's a structural crisis, and as long as we don't acknowledge it, we will not correct it.
But this is a horribly pessimistic outlook that you have given us. So you say that it is correctable. So
Of
what
course.
would you like them to see? What would you like to see them doing?
Well, with agriculture, actually, we went very far. But what can I do with a government that is? See, again, I don't blame the government. If society only wants to vote on the basis of, how do I put it without getting into trouble? On the basis of, not on the basis of their prosperity.
You're talking
And
about the
if you
farmer,
find something very attractive to give society, which is compensation, as I pointed out,
right?
compensation, of course, with this government, you give them credit. You have to give Congress credit for Narega. They won an election on that. And this government will give credit for efficient compensation. The whole purpose of that UPI nonsense was not to grow the Indian economy. It was to give the losers some money efficiently. So today we have a lot of losers. I think this government can claim with great pride it can reach every loser in this country. Every single loser can be reached with a little bit of money. Can't provide them a house, can't provide them good roads, can't provide them good education. So we have got to ask, what can be done for India to stop being a compensatory state? The first thing think we need to do is have a conversation on a very important dimension of inequality, which is holding India back. It has to be an honest conversation. Nobody wants to have an honest conversation about this. The per capita income of UP and Bihar
Yeah.
is less than Nepal. The per capita income of Kerala and Tamil Nadu is almost equal to Indonesia. So logically, what you should be getting is investment happening in these low-wage areas of India, which also happen in the political majority areas. There is no
Okay.
investment happening in the Great Indian Plain. All the investment is happening in South India, which is already maxed out in terms of wage rates, etc. Instead, what are you getting? You're getting export of capital from North India to South India. If you look
Right.
at credit deposit ratios, you will find that they're less than 1 in North India. That is, for every rupee that is deposited, less than 1 rupee is lent, and the surplus goes to South and West India. Right? And the opposite, obviously, for South and West India.
Yeah.
And so the South and West India are absorbing capital from North India, further making it impoverished. And they're absorbing labor. But that labor, if that labor came to South India and became South Indians or Maharashtrians or Gujaratis, then I wouldn't have a problem, no? Because then the population there would go down and prosperity would equalize. But they're not. They're still called migrant labor. We learned that in the pandemic. So
Yes.
their links are primordial. Their links are still with their village in North India and Eastern India. And therefore, what is happening is a sort of third-class version of Dubai. They're coming to South India and they're remitting money to North India. Just like Keralites and Goans go to Dubai and remit money to India.
Right.
So the first thing we got to crack is how to increase economic activity in the majority of India where very poor people, poorer than Nepal live. And there's no point giving me, big talk about UP's transformation. UP is not transforming. If somebody can actually come up and say that the Kumbh Mela is going to act as a engine of growth for UP, then I'm afraid that everyone's got their head at it. Same thing with West Bengal. But we have to ask some complicated questions there first, and these are painful questions to ask. If you really ask a South Indian why they don't invest in North India, what answer do you think you're going to get? The honest answer that they're all thugs.
Right. Exactly.
So let's answer that question. Let me ask you a second, more interesting question. I keep telling South Indians this. Why did UP deindustrialize? When I was a young man, UP was not an industrial wasteland. You had Kanpur, you had Moradabad, you had Gorakhpur, you had Allahabad. Our batteries were built there. The place outside Delhi, just go there called Modi Nagar. It's now nothing. Okay, Modi Nagar was a vibrant industrial center. Kanpur was a huge industrial city. We used to play cricket test matches in Kanpur once upon a time. It had a five-star hotel. It's all gone. Right? Now, people will use Pandana explanations like, oh, the communists. The communists are responsible for the complete destruction of industrialization in all of UP without having any power whatsoever in South India. I don't buy it. So there's something else that was going on there that has caused that deindustrialization to happen. We need to understand whether our infrastructure patterns, our education and health patterns are such, or the very primordiality of North India and Eastern India is holding it back. That is one very important question we've got to ask. The second question we've got to ask, I think, and come with an answer, is the two top level questions. Is how do we get Indians interested in education? Ultimately, productivity comes from education. No Indian is not no Indian. Most Indians are not interested in education. They're interested in credentials. That's why you have quota. Quota doesn't educate you. You cannot create a productive engineer from quota. You can only create someone with a credential to get some low-end job somewhere or take the UPSC or something like that. Right?
Right.
So if you're going to get people to be educated, then we've got to ask what it is we need to do to incentivize people to be genuinely educated. How do we create an education system that creates education? And then skills will follow. This is something people don't understand. They think jobs require skills and therefore we need to create skills. No, that is not how it has worked anywhere in the world. Education creates skills and skills are then used for jobs. If we need to get that right. Now, both the things I'm alluding to are major problems because you see, economics breaks down. So we've got to accept that many of our problems are sociological. Remember that in the old days when we had good higher education, until Nehru and all these bad people came on and started IITs and I am very bad of them. If you look at Delhi, your own city, the colleges are not called Government College 1 or Arvind Kejriwal College or something. Right? They're called St. Stephen's, Hindu, Kinodimal, Bhagat Singh.
Yeah.
Who are these people? Who was then Deen Dayal, whatever, Dayal Singh? Who are these people? So education was a social movement. In Kerala, the most successful educated state, 100% literacy didn't happen because some communists came and decided to do it. It happened because there was a long-standing social movement there. Tamil Nadu's egalitarian existence happens because there was a self-respect movement. You have to read our history and not just the Vedas to understand all this, but people don't want to read history. Or they want to talk about the Vedas all the time as a substitute for history. What can I do? It's a choice you make in life. So that is the second thing I would do. The third thing I would do, which I think is very, very important, is to understand that it is very important for India to try and at least get 20% of. No, wait, one step back. The third thing I would do is I would have a macroeconomic target. Many years ago, Niti Aayog brought out this ridiculous strategy. Somewhere it's there. Some 2019, some rubbish piece of paper they brought out. But I was asked about the strategy. So I said, okay, now if you want to grow at X%, what will be the structure of the economy in 2025? Now, how much will be agriculture? So you have to aim for a structural sort of balance also. How much will come from exports? I'm giving you a proposal for the strategy. This government won't understand, but let me put it out there. Neither will the opposition, because now they're all in the game of compensation. They're not in the game of prosperity. So what I'm saying is purely intellectual curiosity. I feel bad for the country, but that's how it is. I want 60% of my incremental growth. Let's say I want to grow at 9% of GDP. I want 6% of that to come from a profitable, non-subsidized agricultural sector, 250 to 300 rupee shirts and the equivalent in female and children's clothing made in India, a slum-free India with Pakka housing for all, for which I have a blueprint. And by the way, for a profitable and non-subsidized agriculture, the Doubling Farmers Income Initiative, now it's associated with government, was an excellent initiative, except nobody did anything because it involved hard work, not slogans. So, then you move to Viksit Bharat and all that. But there is actually a very good piece of work gathering dust in Niti Aayog, which could be redusted and, adopted, I think. An improved education system, which is more complicated because it's sociological. And I think we need to really invest in getting a profitable, non-subsidized, affordable healthcare system in place. It will create a lot of employment. Why am I selecting these 5 things? On the demand side, because these are the minimum 5 things somebody earning the minimum wage wants to be able to consume with their own money, with dignity. On the supply side, because all this AI and all this nonsense that people talk about on WhatsApp, none of these 5 sectors is affected by that. If they are affected, they're affected positively. So they will all create jobs. So, people focus on the employment problem. Job creation you can't do. You can only do job creation in Sarkar. Activities create jobs. The question you've got to ask is what kind of activities? So, we have these 5 reasonably labor-intensive activities constituting 2/3 of our growth. Another 20% can come from what we do today. All this air travel and FMCG, what you and I consume. That nice painted wall you have behind you. This nice painted wall I have behind me. These are expensive things, but we can afford them. So about 20% will come from our consumption. And about 15 to 20% from exports. If this is the economic structure that we aim for, then we can move away from these empty sounding slogans like Viksit Bharat, and whatever, $5 trillion economy. What is $5 trillion economy? I'm not a communist. Don't just set targets and, forget about how to issue them. It's almost like, you have some man coming out of a cave making a pronouncement, oh, $5 trillion. No responsibility on how it will be done or where it will be done. My minions will follow. The minions just go on doing what they like and say, under the guidance of the great sage, we are moving towards this. This is, you can't work in this trivialized, non-serious, childish way and run a serious country. So if you want to be a serious country, this is what I propose. Have this structure, and we need to discuss this, but seriously. Have this structure and work towards the things you need to do for this structure to be in place. I have no solutions for education and limited solutions for health. I have reasonable solutions for the first 3. I'm not omnipotent. I'm sure there are good people who can provide also solutions for education and health. But what we must all agree on is that growth tomorrow, unlike growth yesterday, 60% of that must come from these 5 things. The demand will follow.
Okay, fantastic. Well, this was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Roy. Hopefully, the policymakers are watching and will watch this, will take some insight.
Opposition also. Tell them all to watch.
Opposition also. Yes. No, policymakers on both sides. The aspiring policymakers and the
I have only
incumbent
one piece of advice for the policymakers. Please be policymakers. Don't be jokers. You have to take, economy is a very serious business. Economy is not a place to do tomfoolery and drama. It's a serious business. So you have to take the economy seriously and be serious about what you're doing. That seriousness is lacking. And I'm not just blaming the government. Of course, lacking in government. And they bear culpability for it because they are the government. But it's also lacking in the opposition. Somebody will say, let's build a ring road. Somebody will say, let's build a film city. There is no coherent, joined up collective thinking going on about what it means to embark on the very serious journey of transformation. And you abuse Nehru as much as you like. But even if he was misguided, he was serious about what he was doing. Garibi Hata was a serious strategy, right? Liberalization in 1991 was a serious strategy. We need to really get serious about what we are doing. This doing something one day and then doing Kumbh Mela the other day, this is not going to do the trick, I'm afraid. So if you're going to be policymakers, get serious about it and do policy making, not performative nautanki. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Roy.
you.